I love it. Don't screw around in Johnson County. All right, screw around and find out, as the kids say. They usually use a different word instead of screw around, but you get the point. Welcome in. Happy Hump Day. It's good to be here on a Wednesday morning. So we had the shooting at Oak Park Mall on Sunday, and it wasn't a shooting in the sense that somebody went in there trying to do harm, but by now you probably are well aware about the fact that there were two alleged shoplifters at Oak Park Mall on Sunday. Undercover officers identified them, and you had one of the individuals who was accused of shoplifting of grabbing an undercover cop's gun, and he fired a gunshot. Now, thankfully, nobody got hurt, but doesn't matter. This kid, I mean, he's not a kid, he's 18 years old, Neri Alberto Gonzalez Munoz, has been charged by the Johnson County District Attorney with 2 counts of aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer. He's also charged with interference with law enforcement, aggravated endangerment of a child, battery on a law enforcement officer, endangerment, carrying a concealed weapon, theft, and unlawful discharge of a firearm. Gonzalez Munoz was in court yesterday for the first time, and a judge set bond at $1 million. Woo! Let's go! You want to pull that crap in Jackson County with Gene? Okay, maybe you got a chance. Come over here to Johnson County, and I know Johnson County's, getting woker by the day, but at least for now, there is still law and order. There is still a sense of you can't be just shoplifting at the Oak Park Mall and then expecting you're going to get away with it. That is not going to happen. No way, no how. So I was happy with that yesterday. I was fired up about it. But then at the same time, it's amazing. You see some of the responses from people on social media to this stuff. And you wonder what planet they're living on. You wonder what world they live in. They live in a world that doesn't actually exist. They think the world is the way it's actually not. And we've got 3 years of evidence to suggest soft on criminals is an abject failure. It doesn't work. I don't care if it's Johnson County, Kansas City. I don't care if it's New York, L.A. It does not work. We have overwhelming evidence to suggest that. But, hey, that's not going to stop a good time, right? That's not going to stop dumb people from having dumb opinions. That's for darn sure. So I'm seeing some of the responses on social media, and here's one that really stood out to me because there was a lot of traction for this specific social media response in the wake of the Oak Park Mall shooting on Sunday. You know how this can be avoided? If cops aren't responding to shoplifting in the first place. Relying on police increases the chances of violence. Full stop.
This is absolutely lit. This is lit.
He's a nut job.
I mean, that's the kind of stuff that is running rampant on social media in the Kansas City area. You have 2 guys allegedly shoplifting. One of them, when confronted, grabs a gun of an undercover cop, fires a gunshot. Now, thank goodness, is in jail, has a bond of $1 million. He's unlikely to be going anywhere. Make an example of him at 18 years old. I don't really care. How many people, how many families go to Oak Park Mall who were potentially at risk and in danger had that thing gone sideways on Sunday? I don't give a crap about this 18-year-old punk. And for these people to be out there saying, this is easy to avoid. If cops aren't responding to shoplifting, then what? Then it's open season on every business at Oak Park Mall. That's the end result of that. I promise you that's not going to end well. If you want to make sure that Oak Park Mall has a vacancy rate of 67%, then that sounds like a brilliant idea. See, the people that come up with these god-awful ideas don't actually do anything for a living, have never run a business, usually don't have families, and sit there behind their screens, single, miserable, and with no concept of how the world actually operates, John Anthony.
I'm thinking if I could have Mark maybe play Circle of Life for me here. I'm at that age where it used to be like you go, hey, this empty field, there's a shopping center there now. You go, I remember when this was an empty field. Well, now we're getting to where these shopping centers are gone. You're going, hey, you know, I remember there used to be a shopping center here.
Well, that's how this is going if these people have their way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, malls have a tough enough time as is getting tenants. We know that. I mean, the mall in general, the whole concept of a mall is becoming antiquated, right? But now you find yourself in a situation where you've got to make sure you're doing everything you can as a community, in this case, Overland Park as a city, as law enforcement, to entice people to come to your mall. And obviously, we know it's been a tough go of it in the Kansas City region here over the last few days with the shooting at Independence Center and then at Oak Park Mall right before the holidays. Timing could not be worse for any of this stuff. And the fact that actually, we can give law enforcement a lot of credit. We can give the Johnson County DA's office, Steve Howe, a lot of credit. We can give the judge, in this case, a lot of credit. Setting the bond at $1 million. You would have found some woke judge over in Jackson County. He might have set the bond at $100,000 or something ridiculous like that. Hey, kid, you're just a victim of society. Don't worry. Just don't do it again there, Sonny. That's the approach some of those judges would have taken. But thankfully, we got a good judge in Johnson County who's not putting up with any of this, and nor should he. But it's amazing to me how we still end up in this situation where people think the police are the problem. We have 3.5 years of data in Kansas City and around the country that confirms law enforcement is not the problem, despite the lies that we were told in the wake of George Floyd. Law enforcement is not the issue here. Anybody telling you that's still the case has not lived through the last 3.5 years in this country. Yet somehow there's this belief that only if we didn't have cops responding to shoplifters, life would be so good. So is this the part where we hire, what were we calling those people? Community organizers? I forget the hot button phrase that was being used back in 2020. Someone can text it in for me. But you remember, we were going to have, instead of having cops, we were going to have like mental health experts and community liaisons and things of that nature. So the community liaison now is supposed to be walking through Oak Park Mall as 18-year-olds are, stealing from businesses. Hey, cut that out, Sonny. Do you need a therapy session? I'm here for you on the way out the door with your brand new Louis Vuitton bag. Excuse me? They want to live in a made-up reality. That's what they want to do.
Yeah, it's like to the point of absurdity of, hey, I don't care where you're going with that large screen TV, but you can't park here. The zone, this is a red curb right here, so I'm going to need you to move it.
You're in front of a fire hydrant, don't you know?
Right.
But enjoy the TV. Chiefs and Eagles on Monday night. Oh, gosh. 913-408-7957 as we kick it off on a Wednesday morning on KCMO. Jerry Moran, Kansas U.S. Senator, is going to be here at 7:30. We got Governor Mike Parson at 8:30 on KCMO Talk Radio. Hit that preset at 95.7 FM as we roll through the morning. Meantime, you also have a local school that has decided it doesn't want armed security guards. Once again, because, cops. Oh, the cops. Oh, they're scary. We'll get to that coming up on KCMO. Yeah, law enforcement, totally worthless. No point in having them around. All they do is scare people, whether it's at Oak Park Mall, and I'm saying this obviously tongue-in-cheek. Oak Park Mall, you had the shooting on Sunday where shoplifters were confronted. One of the shoplifters ended up taking an undercover cop's gun and shooting it in the air. And now he is sitting in jail and has a $1 million bond. So we found that out yesterday. And then also on a similar note, and these two stories actually weave together nicely, Kansas City Public Schools announcing it will not be hiring armed security guards at elementary schools. That news came down yesterday. So this is a mistake. I don't know how you feel. I know many of you have kids in public schools. I will have one starting next year. I have, of course, a 4 and a 2-year-old. And I'll tell you right now, I feel better and would feel better knowing there was an armed guard in and around the school. It's sick. It's twisted. It's not how I grew up, but it is, sad to say, the way of the world. But Kansas City Public Schools decided, you know what, we're not going to go ahead with any of that. We are not going to have armed guards. And you had parents who were split on this.
It protects our kids. Our neighborhoods are really dangerous.
I feel like adding armed guards would be a little bit better because anybody out here could just have a gun.
Officers in schools make kids feel unsafe and are more likely to be criminalized.
What is the role of the officer? It is not to police students.
More likely to be criminalized, that one parent says. Well, geez, I mean, I have done multiple of these Back to Blue tours in recent months where we've gone to area police departments and we have done shows from these police departments. And at every stop, we've talked to a school resource officer. And I know some of you are going to say this is police propaganda, or what do the kids call it? Copaganda, right? I think they have some dumb name for it like that. Copaganda. Oh, yeah. Big, scary stuff. But every one of these folks tell us that it helps them build relationships with kids. These kids oftentimes trust these armed guards at their schools more than sometimes what they have going on at home. We had a story about a school resource officer about a year ago up in Clay County, might have been earlier this year, who was thinking about killing himself. And he was up there on the water tower, one of the water towers up in the Northland. And who did he want to talk to? His school resource officer. And his school resource officer showed up late at night and talked this young man to come off that water tower. Those are the success stories of many of these school resource officers and the value in having them. It's not about, oh, there's a man with a cop. Scary, scary. Oh, these kids, they're more likely to enter a life of crime if they're around an armed guard. What are you talking about? No, I'd like to see that data when that parent spews that nonsense. I'd be very curious to see the data that suggests that. But anyway, Woke 41 had a report on this, 41 Action News. I guess they don't call themselves that anymore, but they're still Woke 41 on this show. And here's part of Woke 41's report.
They brought that idea to parents, to their advisory committee. The committee said the overwhelming feedback was in opposition.
A room full of KCPS families and staff spoke up about adding armed guards in elementary schools.
The topic of the conversation is where I'm going to get my next meal, where I'm going to sleep at tonight.
There are a variety of opinions.
Manuel Clark sits on the district's advisory committee and is a parent to a fourth grader.
It's the concept of whether it is a place that could be targeted, whether that actually exists as an issue.
He said parents brought up how it would make students and staff feel and questions of over-policing.
Over-policing. How about you over-police this? I mean, are you kidding me? And I love how, well, I don't love it, but when they say, well, we're just kind of wondering if this is a place that could be targeted. Well, here's the thing. 99.999% of the schools are not targets. But it only takes one lunatic, one crazy person, one person who is not all mentally there. And because of the fact that we have such societal rot when it comes to people not looking out for each other, not looking out for their family, not looking out for their neighbors and their friends, it only takes one for potential tragedy to take place. So to sit here and say, well, you know, we don't really think this is a place, these Kansas City public school elementaries, that could be targeted. Well, I mean, first off, you're kind of bragging. I don't want to say bragging, but you're literally doing news pieces on how you could be a target because you're not going to have any armed guards at the elementary schools. You literally just did a news piece suggesting that any crazy lunatic out there that you are worthy of being a target because, well, you know, that's not going to happen here. That's the thing about these tragedies. No one ever expects it to be them. No one ever thinks it's going to happen at their school. And God willing, it never does. But I'm not going to deny the way of the world right now, and I certainly know this much. I don't know about you at 913-408-7957, but I feel much better and would feel much better knowing that there was some form of law enforcement on the premise of where my child was at school. And it's a no-brainer. Mark, do you know, you've got 2 girls in elementary schools. Do you know if they have armed guards there at the school?
No, I don't think so. They have everything locked down, and, you have to show an ID before they even unlock the front door, so they have a lot of security measures.
But there is not a person there necessarily. Okay. That's, but they've got what they feel they need there at the school.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I know it's not commonplace right now, especially in elementaries, but heck, if it's an option, I would feel better about having that. I don't see the downside in having that in this climate. And if you're going to say, well, we're not really a target, that just feels like a mistake. John's in Blue Springs. What's up, John?
Hey, I'm sorry, but I'm kind of confused, and I know words have meaning. Are we talking about a school resource officer who's part of the police department, who's trained everything that goes with that, or are we discussing an armed guard? And there's a huge difference there because an armed guard is much different than a school resource officer. Now, I do agree that there should be something there. It's never going to prevent a shooting, but what it can do is provide a deterrent. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what most people would want. I would want that for my kids. My kids are grown up. But there's a huge difference between a school resource officer who comes under the police department or the education department versus an armed guard. Both have to be trained. Both have to have all that. So I realize I'm splitting hairs, but words have meaning.
Here's what I would say, John, and thanks so much. We're up against it. They're talking about armed guards. The reason I'm mentioning school resource officers in this case is because school resource officers, to me, are a clear sign that having law enforcement around kids is not a bad thing. In fact, it can often be a good thing where you develop relationships with these kids and kids realize, hey, cops are just folks in the community like my dad, like my mom. They're regular people. But in this case, in terms of what you're asking, the public schools were looking at actually hiring armed security guards. But that doesn't mean they're not people, too, who just want to be there potentially to help the kids. News coming up in a minute. We're back at 913-408-7957. And a fight almost broke out in Congress. That and more next. 6:35. Happy Wednesday morning. We have made it to Hump Day on KCMO Talk Radio. Thanks for being here and being a part of the show. And hit that preset at 95.7 FM. So we're having this conversation with you after Kansas City Public Schools decided that they were not going to have armed security guards at elementary schools. They made that decision this week. Woke 41 had the full report on it. And part of what was a disappointment to me in terms of what people were saying, one of the guys who was on the board, we played the clip before the break, was, well, we don't think this is a place that could be targeted. Well, I mean, you're making a good assumption because 99.999% of schools, thank goodness, are not going to be targeted. But that doesn't mean you're doing everything you can when it comes to being a deterrent and protecting your own kids. So they were considering hiring armed security guards, which, yes, is different from a school resource officer, but still, it's something that obviously is something that works in many of our area schools. And we have many of them in our area schools. And we've talked to these folks whenever we do our Back to Blue tours. So I know that a school resource officer is a different person from an armed security guard. That being said, I still believe that it actually allows these young kids, if they see an armed security guard, I know it's not necessarily maybe a cop, but it's somebody of authority who is there to protect you and your friends and your teachers and everybody else who's in the school. I don't think that's going to scare kids. I don't think we have to worry about this over-policed environment. It's called, hey, yeah, there's Bob. He's the armed security guard. Bob protects us, right? Like, it's elementary school kids. That's all you have to say. That's all it takes. Fenny's in Lenexa at 913-408-7957. Hey, Fenny, good morning. You're on KCMO.
Hey, good morning, Pete. My thoughts are, would you rather have your daughters protected by a trained professional with mega hours of training or rent a cop. Number two is the vulnerable times for a school to be assaulted would be in the morning when you let your kids out of the bus, the doors are wide open, and also in the evening when they let the kids out to get on the bus. It's open field for targeting. There's also school activities at night that the doors are open, carnivals, basketball games, you name it. There's plenty of time to work around the in-class time. And thank you for your time. And how about those Missouri Tigers? Huh?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well done there, brother. How about that? Well said all around. I mean, yeah, we've had issues at football games here in town. I think we had one over in KCK. There was a shooting at a football game, a few weeks back. And they actually decided to move the games to earlier kickoff times to try to maybe prevent some of the riffraff from showing up at these games. So Fenny's right. There's been issues, and I'm not suggesting there's a perfect answer here to any of this. I just want to play the numbers. It's pretty simple for me. I want to play the numbers, and I want to do everything I can to make sure that my kids and your kids and anyone in Kansas City's kids are as safe as possible. And while I don't like the fact that we even have to have this conversation about armed security guards, when Columbine happened, I was a kid. So I think it would have been middle school by then. But I remember what a shocker that was. And that obviously was the first one of these that has, unfortunately been part of the national landscape for the better part of 25 years since that happened. And it was a shocker at the time, but we should have known that really changed everything when we think about saving and protecting our kids in schools. It changed everything because we have seen copycat after copycat after copycat. Now, not as frequent as the media likes to portray. I mean, Woke 41 Action News, in their article here, they wrote here the first sentence: the Kansas City Public School District said it began exploring the idea of hiring armed security guards at elementary schools in response to mass shootings across the country. Of course, that's how they frame it, right? They're acting like there's one every other week. That doesn't mean that the ones that have happened haven't been tragic and aren't terrible, whether it's Parkland, whether it's Uvalde. I mean, these things are just absolute tragedies. But they clearly do not happen as frequently as some people want to make it out to be. So now that we sit here and we try to figure out, okay, what's the best way forward? How do we need as a culture and a society to handle this? Well, the best thing you can do is do everything in your power to protect the kids. And I don't want to hear from any of these schools that, I don't think we've got the budget for that. If you are going to tell me, if you're going to look a parent in the eye, a tax-paying parent in the eye, and say we can't do everything in our power to protect your child, then get out of the line of work. Go home, retire, get out. I don't want to hear from you. You've got superintendents in this community making $350,000. And God bless them, I guess this is still America. You're going to tell me you can't hire security? You don't have it in the budget? We might have to raise your taxes for that. No, I'll scratch together a couple of dimes between the couches and I'll find the money. Trust me, I'll find the money real fast in your budget to hire some armed security at some of these schools. I have been a proponent of it for a long time, and Kansas City Public Schools made a mistake. They made a mistake. They're listening to parents, and I get it. That's good. But man, oh, man, oh, man. Sometimes you just have to do what is right on this stuff and not always listen to what ignorant people are saying, and that's unfortunately what seems to have happened here.
It protects our kids. Our neighborhoods are really dangerous.
I feel like adding armed guards would be a little bit better because anybody out here could just have a gun.
Officers in schools make kids feel unsafe and are more likely to be criminalized.
What is the role of the officer? It is not to police students.
I'm still waiting for the data on that one. Officers in schools make kids feel unsafe. That's all. I just want to see it. I want to see it to believe it. I don't think that's too big of an ask. I'm sure you don't either. I just want to see it to believe it. The text line is 913-408-7957. Pete, drop the 6th assistant principal and hire a guard for your school. Now we're talking.
I think the quote might more accurately be from from the person there that the school resource officers make the kids' mothers feel
the woke moms feel unsafe. You're right about that.
The kids don't think anything of it.
Yeah, the kids are cool. Yeah, cool. Hey, it's Cop Bob.
Officer Tim.
Yeah, that's right.
Carl Oakman, the chief of KCK, talked about the neighborhood guy that he knew. It wasn't a school resource officer, but how they felt really close to the guy that came through their neighborhood all the time.
That's right. Yeah, he told that story quite often.
Same effect.
Mm-hmm. Pete, this is on the text line. When Columbine happened, I was a law enforcement officer. One law enforcement officer kept the shooters from having access to the entire school and allowed a majority of the kids to escape. That is an excellent point, going back to that period in time 25 years ago. And we forget that, right? We conveniently like to forget that. So we'll see how this ultimately ends up playing out. And I obviously wish the best for Kansas City Public Schools, but dang, I think they messed this one up big time. Coming up, there was a fight that nearly broke out in Congress yesterday. Literally, you had a U.S. senator challenging a witness to a fight. Get up here, boy! You show me! Oh, yeah. It was wild. If you haven't seen this, we'll play the audio for you. Because, by the way, it's somebody from one of our neighboring states who wanted to fight. We've got the audio. It's absolutely hysterical. Coming up next on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. 7:05, welcome in on a Wednesday morning. Great to have you here on KCMO. Now on the FM at 95.7. So we're monitoring, by the way, a story this morning here. Kansas City Police responding to calls of shots fired near 10th and Broadway. While en route, officers learned it was an actual shooting and upon arrival found a man lying in the street outside of a nearby vehicle. The man was unconscious, suffering from apparent gunshot wounds. That is right where we used to live, 10th and Broadway. We were right up the street there in Kansas City I guess we were probably 6th and Broadway. It's amazing what's happened in 5 years. I mean, in 5 years ago, there was never a concern about any of this. Now, they always did feed the homeless right around that 10th and Broadway area. There was always a fairly long line to feed the homeless right around 10th and Broadway. But it was never one of those things where, you had to worry about this stuff happening up the street. I'll tell you that right now. And now you got a dead guy middle of the street, 3 a.m. And heck, I used to walk Woody sometimes right around 3 a.m. before, I'd get off to work. So I remember doing that many times. Maybe not 3, probably 3:30 or 4, but I remember doing it. And, jeez, gosh. But don't worry. Quentin Lucas has an opinion on the Independent shooting. Dude, 10th and Broadway, primo downtown real estate. You got a dead guy lying in the street 3 hours ago. Can we worry about that, please? Holy crap. You got to be kidding me.
Looks like police were wrapping up. They had towed a vehicle here just a second ago. They've got the traffic blocked off there in front for a block at least. So Broadway's blocked there from 10th. Mm-hmm. It looks like down to 11th at least for the moment, although it looks like they're wrapping up, pulling the tape up and towing a vehicle.
I mean, you got some pretty nice like condo townhouses there in the area. You got the Queef right there. The Quaff. Sorry. I can't believe I just said that. I was like, it's with a Q, and then I said the wrong. Oh gosh, please,
you're safe.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The Quaff.
Incidental contact.
Who names a restaurant the Quaff anyway? What does that mean? Oh, I can't.
I've always wondered that.
I'm embarrassed right now.
It's not the first time I've said that too on accident.
Okay, all right. Well, now I'm sitting here blushing. I just called the Quaff the wrong name.
Right. I thought you did it on purpose.
No, I know that actually no. That was not like me calling the Commanders the Redskins. That was not on purpose. No. That was a legitimate mistake. But I've had many a beer there at the Quaff. Jeez, so it's right up the street from there on Broadway.
Right up front, it looked like.
Yeah, dead guy, 10th and Broadway. I mean, you got to be kidding me.
Not too far from a streetcar stop.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. Used to walk by that all the time and wonder why this thing was here. Oh, man. I mean, you got Majestic right there, too.
Right.
I mean, it's love that part of town.
Mm-hmm. It's a hop and block.
Yeah. But unfortunately, you're having many of the issues that are impacting other parts of town. And what did we say for the last 3 years? You're going to ultimately have crime that will spread throughout the city. If you don't take care of it, if you don't deal with it, it will spread. There's no doubt about it. All right. So Laura Kelly and Mike Parson yesterday rolled out an ad. Yes, our two governors rolled out an ad. And the ad is about how to disagree better. That's right. Take a listen to this. I want to get your feedback on this at 913-408-7957. Laura Kelly, Mike Parson, the new ad they rolled out yesterday about disagreeing better. Of course, Kelly, a Democrat, Parson, a Republican. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Laura Kelly, Democratic Governor of Kansas.
And I'm Mike Parson, Republican Governor of Missouri.
We probably don't agree on much.
And that's why I ordered Kansas City, Missouri barbecue.
And I ordered the good stuff, Kansas City, Kansas barbecue.
But regardless, we're committed to disagreeing better.
Like in 2019, when we came together to end the Kansas City economic border war, which at its heart was just bad policy.
And wasn't in the best interest of Missourians or Kansans? Is that correct?
It is.
Well, we'll just call you neighbors. And like any good neighbor, we'll continue to disagree on plenty of things.
Like barbecue, tax policy, or who's the bigger Chiefs fan?
As the 2024 election cycle heats up, we hope to speak for the entire country in saying,
we don't always have to agree, but we can learn to disagree better.
All right, we can learn to disagree better. Does it make you feel warm and fuzzy inside when you hear that from Mike Parson and Laura Kelly? I think that the intentions of this ad were good. I want to give all people the benefit of the doubt. I really do. And I'm trying to get Laura Kelly on the show tomorrow. We're going to have Governor Parson on coming up at 8:30 this morning. But they sit down. If you haven't seen the video, it's up on my Twitter page, at Pete Mundo. You can see it there. And they're sitting down at Q39, and they have that conversation. But here's the thing. When you look at the comments, they're getting crushed by people across the board. Now, that doesn't really mean anything because social media is a cesspool, so we know how that works. But as much as I appreciate them wanting to make this work, the other part of me would say, what have you guys been doing for the last 5 years now? I mean, Mike Parson took over in 2018 after Greitens got the boot. Kelly's been there since, 18, 19. So you guys want to talk about this, border war and ending the economic border war and all this stuff that's been all feel-good, chitter chat for the last couple of years. But what are you actually doing? I'm not going to pick a side on these two. But what I will say is put your money where your mouth is. You guys had this economic border war truce that you talked about that you apparently made some agreement on pre-COVID. And we've had multiple examples since then of, the border war continuing on, being all well and good. You've got folks in Kansas on the political side talking about getting the Chiefs over to KCK. We're going to pass sports betting. We're going to make all this money. And then the Chiefs are coming over to our side. Like, they kind of said that without saying that over the last couple of years. So both sides are to blame on this. Both sides, neither side, I guess, is totally innocent here. I just wonder if you're buying this beyond some feel-good social media ad. And that would be my question for Mike Parson. Now, of course, this has been fodder for many Republicans yesterday. Bill Eigel, who is running for governor, he's running for governor against Mike Kehoe and Jay Ashcroft because Mike Parson is termed out. So he's done come January of 2025. Bill Eigel, he is a former state senator from the St. Louis side of the state. He shared this video and he wrote here, "This is why Republicans lose elections." He writes, "Democrats are destroying our cities, mutilating our kids, trampling our rights, and defunding our police, but Governor Parson is worried about being nice. What a joke. Jefferson City needs a reckoning." That is from Bill Eigel responding to that video. And you knew that was coming. I mean, that is just absolute gold when it comes to being fodder for somebody running in a primary. And by the way, I'm sure somebody, if they were running in a Democratic primary on the Kansas side, would probably say a very similar thing, just in reverse, about Republicans being evil January 6th sympathizers and the whole thing. So I want to hear from you at 913-408-7957 because I don't know what the feedback is going to be amongst the normal folks, not social media trolls, John Anthony.
I'm far from the MTV generation, short of attention span theater, but the thing was slow.
It was very slow.
And so, if they were both saying, hey, we're getting together to fight fentanyl coming into the area, then I'd be for it, but I couldn't hear anything like that. I'm not sure if that was said or not.
No. It's just
nothing like that, right?
No, it was just feel good. Hey, you like barbecue? Who's the bigger Chiefs fan?
Yeah, right.
Come on. Give me something good. What are you working
Adams
on?
Will love this.
Yeah. Give me something good. Give me some juice here. 913-408-7957. Jerry Moran will be here at 7:30 on KCMO Talk Radio. We'll get to you. And then there's this big beef involving one of our own, Ben Shapiro. We'll get to that and much more coming up 7:15 on a Wednesday morning on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. Well, thanks as always to Bill O'Reilly for his morning update. I will say Bill's going to be on the show Friday morning at 8:30, and we're going to have a pretty cool announcement with our pal Bill O'Reilly. So do not miss that. I know it's a ways away, Friday morning at 8:30, but want to remind you of it while it's on my mind. Bill's going to be doing something very special for us this holiday season, and it can involve you as well. So stay tuned for that Friday morning, 8:30, with our friend Bill O'Reilly here on KCMO Talk Radio. Now, speaking of friends of the show, Ben Shapiro, you hear him every day at 2 o'clock. His show runs here on KCMO. And he's got himself in a beef with Candace Owens. Now, Ben is one of the owners of the Daily Wire. Good website, do a lot of news. They got his show on there, Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, some of the guys that you hear on the radio here on KCMO. So they're partners of ours. They're partners of the companies. And I'm a big fan of Ben. Ben's been on this show many times, and it's always good to have him on and hear him at 2 o'clock every day. But he's got a problem because Candace Owens is basically taking from the far left squad talking points when it comes to Israel and Hamas. It's very bizarre. I understand that, to stand out these days, you got to be a contrarian. But Candace Owens, who I've always thought was a grifter in many ways, has lost her mind on the issue. She has been very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. And I would argue if you're sympathetic to the Palestinian cause right now, you are sympathetic to Hamas, who doesn't give one rip about its own people. And on both sides, more so on the progressive side of the aisle, but you see a little bit of this too on the far right, and it's all undercut by anti-Semitism. And we know that Candace, pals around, or at least used to pal around with Kanye. We know how certainly he feels about Jews. So none of this is necessarily surprising. But Candace Owens has kind of been on this mission now for the last month. Just it's always done in the form of questioning. I'm just here to ask questions. All right, when people do that. It's like, no, there's not a lot of questions to be asked. I get it's a complex foreign affairs issue. But when it comes to Hamas going into Israel and slaughtering 1,400 Jews for no reason other than the fact that they're Jewish, in the worst attack on the Jews since the Holocaust, there's not a lot of questions to be asked here. It's pretty black and white. Most things aren't black and white these days. This one is just about as black and white as it gets. But if you just pose your line of thinking in, I just got some questions, you can find, some suckers who want to hear a good conspiracy theory. You can find them, unfortunately, in corners of the internet. So she's been doing this now for the better part of a month. Ben Shapiro owns the company, of course. He's one of the owners of the company. And finally, he spoke about it just the other day at a fundraiser. Here's what he had to say about his technically colleague, Candace Owens.
Yes, the question was about Candace Owens. I think her behavior during this has been disgraceful. Without a doubt. I think it's I can't go with that. Yeah, she still works for my company. And I think she's been absolutely disgraceful. I think that her faux sophistication on these particular issues has been ridiculous. It's not called sophistication, it's ridiculous. Everybody can see the moves that she's making and the things that she's saying, and I find them disreputable.
All right, that was Ben Shapiro talking about his colleague, technically at the Daily Wire, Candace Owens. Now, some people are, now suddenly saying, oh, Ben Shapiro's not really a free speech guy because he might fire Candace Owens. Well, first off, that hasn't necessarily happened yet. But secondarily, here's the thing about free speech. You can have it. We do have it in this country. But it doesn't protect you when it comes to your business necessarily. Right? Like that. These are free speech in the eyes of the government. Free speech against the government is different from free speech when it comes to your employer. It's like we talk about with Colin Kaepernick or any of these stories that get a lot of national attention. You absolutely have free speech. You can go stand on the street corner and scream whatever you want. Heck, we see that on the plaza right after Hamas attacks Israel, and you got hundreds of people down there on the plaza screaming about, supporting Palestine right now. You got free speech rights, right? But it doesn't mean your employer has to endorse it. It doesn't mean your employer has to like it or support it. It just means you're allowed to say what you want, and the government cannot do anything about it within reason. I mean, if you're threatening somebody, that's a different story. But if you want to talk about how great you think the Palestinian cause is and be sympathetic towards Hamas, I mean, I think it's despicable and disgusting, but there's nothing I can technically do about it, or you should want the government to do about it. So people like to conflate that stuff and say, Ben, Mr. Free Speech, is going to potentially cancel Candace Owens. Well, that hasn't happened yet, number one. And number two, if it did, well, that would be his business, and Candace could go find herself getting employed by, someone like a Nick Fuentes or something like that. I'm sure, she could find employment somewhere. She'll be fine. But hey, the grift appears to be alive and well. Coming up on KCMO Talk Radio, Jerry Moran is going to be here, one of our Kansas U.S. senators, of course. We've got Governor Mike Parson coming up at 8:30. A busy show ahead on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM, and stream us at kcmotalkradio.com. Next time you think the government's really looking out for your best interests, I just think about this story I'm about to share with you here. So yesterday, it was about 3 o'clock. I'm listening to the Ramsey Show here on KCMO. And one of the things I like about the show is, yes, you hear stories from people and they ask questions, and many of us know the answers to the questions. Don't go into debt. Debt's bad. I mean, a lot of us get it, right? But I learned something from these people, not in terms of what not to do, but oftentimes just how screwed up the system is. So this lady calls in to the Ramsey Show yesterday, and she's like, hey, I got a problem here. I've got kids. They've got health issues, and I'll play the call here in a second, but they've got health issues, costs her thousands of dollars a month for the kids' health care. She recently lost her husband, so her income is down, but she doesn't make enough to cover the health care bill for the kids. So she's on Medicaid. And Medicaid, to keep Medicaid, she has to make less than a certain amount of money a year. So she is literally incentivized to stay on the government dole and to stay in poverty. Take a listen to this call and tell me how you don't come away infuriated at the government and feeling an incredible amount of sympathy for this woman who's trying to raise two kids. I think she was up in Missoula, Montana. Raised two kids, husband's recently deceased, and she's got to figure out how to make all this work.
So my oldest is 20, and so he's not really he's in my household, but not directly in my financial household.
Okay.
I have a 17-year-old son, a 12-year-old daughter, and a 10-year-old daughter. And
Okay.
I don't have a traditional income. I rely on death benefits. And the reason my two girls have health issues, and so one of them takes a medication that's like $9,000 a month.
Wow.
So I have to rely on Medicaid. So my income is very limited as to what I can bring in
What is
to
the
have her medicine covered.
Yeah, so let's dive into that. So what is the limit in order to get the medication covered via Medicaid, what's the limit on you financially to what you could actually earn?
$26,000 a year.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's keeping you in poverty.
$26,000 a year is the most money she can make in order to get Medicaid to cover her kids' $9,000 a month healthcare costs. Think about that. And by the way, even if it was $40,000 a year or $50,000 a year, she would be screwed. I mean, her healthcare costs for one of her children, $9,000 a month. It's, do the math, right? What are we talking here? $110,000 a year in health insurance or health care for her child? So here's what you've got going on in part. You have a healthcare system that's totally broken. And spare me the whole, this is why we need single payer healthcare. This wouldn't be a problem with Okay, ask anybody in a single payer system. Go to Britain and if they have money, they come here to get their healthcare taken care of. Same with Canada. All right, Canadians come across the border all the time. Thankfully, they go back, but they come across the border all the time if they have the means to do so for their healthcare. That's what they do. That's a fact. So spare me the socialized medicine being the answer. It's not. But I will readily admit and point out that really any government involvement in the system has been an abject failure. The government has helped prop up a system that, first off, gives you no clarity on the cost of any medical bills, right? Think about shopping for your medical care. It's impossible to do. It's not like buying a car. It should be like buying a car, but it's not. Go ask a doctor next time, hey, doc, what's this what's this cost? What's that cost? They don't even know what to tell you. They just send in some stupid number to the insurance company. The insurance company is like, yeah, we think it's worth X. We'll cover Y. And then they send you the bill. The system is so beyond screwed up. And now you have the government, which has helped screw up the system, sit there and say, oh, by the way, if you want help to cover, let's say, your child's $9,000 a month medical costs, well, that's great, but you're going to have to stay in poverty and not make more than $26,000 a year. So what do we have then? We have individuals who want to get ahead. I mean, I could hear it in that lady's voice. She's not proud of her situation. She doesn't want to be in that situation. But what would you do if you were her? You have really no option. It's not like, hey, go get a job. How are you going to cover $108,000 in healthcare costs for one of your kids? You can make $200,000 a year, and you're not covering those costs after taxes. So it's an impossible situation. And you have government that has, frankly, helped set up this system that keeps people in poverty. Because what does it keep people, by the way, doing? It keeps them voting for one political party over the other. They create a system that forces these people to stay in poverty. And then they say, boy, you better keep voting for us, because if not, who knows what the other guys are going to do? Boy, they're going to take that Medicaid check right out of your hands. Of course, that's not the purpose, but the entire system is broken. It needs massive, massive reform. And that example yesterday, I was texting with Ken Coleman, who's the host, who was hosting that show yesterday for Dave. And I said, dude, that was the most screwed up thing I've ever heard in my life. And he goes, yep. He said, first off, the 20-year-old's got to get off his butt. And he's probably right about that. The 20-year-old's got to get a job and start helping out. But he sent me a note. He goes, Pete, I should have gone on a rant about the government. I said, that's fine, Ken. You can save it for my show sometime. You come on here and you do that rant all you want. He comes on usually every other Monday morning, so I know what I'm going to ask him about come next Monday morning when he's supposed to be on the show. But I said, listen, save it for our show, Ken. I want it pent up over the next 5-6 days, and I want you ranting here on KCMO about that poor lady and how the government system has helped screw her over and her family, and it's through no fault of her own. What a world. The text line is 913-408-7957. Pete, I work in healthcare. It is so messed up, you don't know the half of it. That's from Kevin. No, Kevin, I appreciate that. We had yesterday, we have our third daughter coming in March, and we have a high deductible plan, HSA and the whole thing. And, we got a bill yesterday for some of the things, involving the baby and whatnot. And, Kate's on the phone calling in, trying to figure out what this bill is for, what that bill is for. I mean, it's out of control. And here's the other problem. You call, and you're lucky if you get somebody who can even tell you what the heck's going on. It is a completely broken system. And the question is, how are we going to fix it? Are we going to go the way of Canada and Europe? Or are we going to actually open up the marketplace? And are we going to promote free market? That remains to be seen. Coming up on KCMO Talk Radio just after 8 o'clock. Oak Park Mall, a suspect has been charged in that case. And I'll give credit where it's due to folks in local law enforcement who went about this the right way. But still, that's not good enough for some people. They think that shoplifters should just be walking willy-nilly all around Oak Park Mall and have no issues with the cops. We'll get to it next.